start the process by introducing Christian. Christian is a professor at RSCI University of Medicine and Health and Sciences in Dublin, in Ireland, lives in the UK, and also travels quite a bit. And the last few contacts I've had with him was you were in the United States. And I don't know whether you know about Christian's website. He has a website which is about coaching on a motorcycle, and he actually does that. So it's quite fascinating to see this sort of it comes to life and work through that. But if you go to his website, you'll see these sort of examples of what he does around the world. And it's quite exciting to see how he also does this with others. And this book that he's particularly put together as a co-author, he does this with other authors as well, other books, if you see on his website. And this one particularly we're looking at today is very much about listening, and particularly the radical listening methodology and the structure that Christian and his colleague have put together in this book is amazing. I found it really helpful to think about it, and it was an opportunity to have an opportunity there to have Christian come along and speak about the methodology, the structure, and also engage you in the thinking about how strong is your active radical listening techniques as we go through this. So I'm going to hand it over to Christian and let you run the show, sir.
Thank you so much, Paul. And what a great pleasure it is to be with all of you. I've actually been very much looking forward to this. I see some familiar faces, so thank you for those of you who are I already know. And I'm thinking of this as an opportunity to get even more connected with some of you. So I'm very grateful that you're here. Obviously, these books, Paul, as you say, they're my attempt to share ideas that might be helpful. Now, radical listening wasn't written only for coaches, but of course, both myself and Robert Biswastiner are executive coaches. We train people to become coaches. So coaches were firmly in our mind, as well as leaders. And so, just so I can be clear about my intention is to be of as much value as I can be to your professional practice, whether you're a coach or leader. And the reason I'm interested in that is because I really appreciate the work you do and the impact that it has on others. So my intention is to be as helpful for your learning as possible. So I do like to see the chat. And so if you're up for it, if you could just put in the chat what you're most hoping to take away from this session, because I do want it to be flexible. What is it you're hoping to take away? I'm not going to give any examples. You can put anything you like in the chat as long as it's legally acceptable to do that. And I have prepared some slides for today, but very few. I've only got 8 slides, and I'm not committing to stick to them. And one of the things I've done is I've hand-drawn the slides as well. All the slides are hand-drawn. That's something that I've been doing recently. And some of them have been hand-drawn thinking of you, of this group. I was kind of imagining, what's this group going to be like? So far, you're looking really positive and wonderful as I had imagined. But that's part of my preparation. So throughout, I hope I'll be saying things that might be useful for us as coaches or leaders. And one of the things is, how do we prepare for sessions? How do we prepare? And, I've trained so many people to become coaches, and often they're thinking, I need to be, not asking these kind of questions. I need to be thinking. But for me, part of the preparation is thinking, what's the right kind of energy that I want to bring to the interaction? And for that, that's why I like to do, my mind's always racing. So I've got a little iPad here. And what I do is I tend to just draw and think about the group. So I've done that already. So I'm looking at the chat here. Thank you so much for all of you who are engaging with that. Great. Well, engagement's pretty high. Develop further skills. Yes, Georgia, we're going to do that. Zoe, yes, we can always improve. Zoe, already there's a kind of a mindset thing about we can always get better. And one of the things when I think of coaching, I think that coaching is a part of the service industry. So always improving. Um, for me, it's about being a professional, and this idea that we can always get better is essential. So one of my reflective practice questions is, how can I be of even better service to others? Connie, one fresh idea. I think that's almost guaranteed. Paul, new perspectives, yes. Listen better, yes. We're going to cover that. Loana, thank you. Vicky, yes, definitely about creating environments. Yeah, what's the difference between this and active listening? That's a great question. Took a lot of guts for us to call this radical listening. Nuggets, yes. Yeah, deep listening and radical listening, absolutely. Insights, hangout, thank you. That's the same for me, Ange. So quite a few about what's radical about this, and then some ideas about being um, practical things to take away. So I think we're on the right call. So I'm very grateful for that. So Radical Listening, obviously a book that I co-authored with Robert Biswas-Diener. He's one of my mentors. I've learned so much from Robert. The great news is there's an opportunity to hear from Robert about the same book. And so that'll be coming up later. So not only have I hand drawn the slides, I'm only sharing um, photographs that I've taken. So these are photographs that I've taken of places that are special to me. And this is a photo of um, a place in Tenerife. I also spent some time in the Canary Islands, and this is the natural pool in Los Gigantes, where I sit and reflect sometimes. So I'm going to start off by just sharing some of the big ideas behind radical listening. And um, I hope I'm not going to have to say, well, this is what's radical about listening. I hope that kind of emerges. And I'm interested in what you think, whether anything I say makes you think, oh, wait a minute, that is different from active listening, because obviously we built on active listening. So, one of the big ideas is that radical listening, more than thinking of it as a way of communicating, that radical listening is about uh, a way of connecting with people. It's a way of building relationships. So the subtitle of the book is The Art of True Connection. Radical Listening, The Art of True Connection. So that's one of the big ideas, and I will share a few other of the big ideas as we go through. And right at the heart of radical listening is this idea of positive intention. So before any listening interaction, we would set a positive intention. So imagine all the conversations that you have and think about this idea of identifying a positive intention. So when it comes to listening, what is the reason that I'm going to be listening to this person? And what's my positive intention for listening to them? Now, I think as coaches, this is easier for us. And I hope you're already doing that. You're kind of getting into that mindset. And with coaching, we do have a clear intention in mind. And that intention is very aligned to the purpose of radical listening. The purpose of radical listening is to listen to people in such a way that they feel seen, valued, and heard. So if you listen to people in that way, where the purpose of the listening is that they feel seen, valued, and heard, you're already doing radical listening. As Paul mentioned, I work in a University of Medicine and Health Sciences. One of the things our university does is it trains people to become doctors, surgeons, pharmacists, and dentists. And when I'm talking to my colleagues, um, one of the little lines I use is um, listening is the intervention, right? Because often we're talking about how do we communicate, and this idea of the bedside manner and how you communicate with people is important, and of course that's clear. But I love the idea that sometimes listening is the intervention, and that the way we listen can motivate people, can increase their engagement, can make them feel more agency. And you can see how that would be important in health settings as well. So that's the idea. Positive, we start with a positive intention, and that's one of our big ideas. And we're interested in making this tangible and practical for leaders, coaches, or anyone who, for whom listening is a big part of their professional role. So that's why we've identified 6 skills. And I'm only going to be talking about 2 of those skills today, maybe 3. And those skills we've identified as internal and external skills. And the reason we wanted to break it down in this way is so that this is highly practical. And people, it's not a case of saying, oh, we need to listen better, because what does that actually mean? If somebody, we have to listen better. This is to say that there's some micro skills within listening that each of us can improve and enhance. So to give you an example, acknowledging is one of the skills of radical listening. While we're listening to people, we're finding ways to acknowledge them. So, what sort of things do I mean? Acknowledge their strengths, acknowledge the challenges they're facing, acknowledge the wisdom that they bring. Um, so, just to test this idea, because I think we're all doing this, would it be okay for me to ask you, how do you already acknowledge in conversations, either as a coach or a leader? And can you make them really brief, some really short examples in the chat of how you already acknowledge others? I'll stop sharing for a moment because I'd like to see everyone. And by the way, even if you're watching the recording, we're delighted that you're here and watching this. And for those who are here in person, I'm just so grateful to be spending time with you. I do love the idea of us being a global community, and I'm grateful to the Association for Coaching for facilitating things like this. So you can see here, you're already doing it, right? Um, Smile, Olivia, and you're good at that. That's one of your top strengths for sure. Um, So smiling is acknowledging, but can you see? I just want to pick a little example. So I think what we're saying, radical listening, is about being super intentional. Smiling, but when are we smiling? Can you see that that makes a big difference to the person being seen, valued, and heard? Nodding, exactly. It's a timing thing as well. Yeah, exactly. Use their words. Can you see this is a way of acknowledging their uniqueness? I pick out unusual words that they use, and I would play it back to them. Can you see that me using their language is a way of acknowledging them, showing them that they're seen, valued, and heard? A smile, nod, yeah, and there's a lot of nonverbal ways we can acknowledge people. A frown. Do you know how many of the coaches I train are frowning? And they say to me, Christian, I realize I'm so into it that I'm frowning. But the timing of the frown can show acknowledging, gosh, this is complicated. I'm acknowledging this sounds challenging. I'm acknowledging this is a puzzle. We need to figure this out together. Great. Playing back, Vicky, thank you for using that phrase as well. There's a 4th edition of my Introduction to Coaching Skills book coming out next week. And I've changed the name of one of the skills. I now consider playing back to be the key coaching skill. Playing things back, summarizing, paraphrasing. That's acknowledging people as well. Thank you. Replaying, I think we're talking about the same thing here. Using of courseness, beautiful words. You know, of courseness, Connie, we could spend our whole hour talking about the of courseness. But I like this idea of normalizing. And I think that's what coaches do. We kind of normalize because the client's coming to us saying, I'm the only one experiencing this, or there's something wrong with me, and we're normalizing it. So these are all beautiful ways of acknowledging, nodding, smiling, recognizing experience, asking questions, being fully present. So, Alexandra, that would be another definition of radical listening. And that is radical in our day and age. To be able to give people our full and undivided attention. That is what radical listening. It's a way of being fully present for someone else. Saying things like thank you for sharing, mirroring, affirming, asking them to tell you more, checking they're feeling understood. Oh, good. Thank you, Emily. Taking a pause. We're going to be talking about that today. Allow myself to be moved with them. How beautiful these things are. So, if I were to say, how would you assess uh, a master coach, right? How would you assess? And that's something organizations like the AC need to do. But for me, one way to really evaluate top level coaching is to record a person. So imagine you're being recorded during a coaching conversation. And in my mind, if I were the person assessing, I would like to pause at any point during the, let's say, 30-minute coaching session. And at any point, I'd like to say, what's the reason you're doing that thing you're doing? Whatever it is. They might be nodding, they might be smiling. Do you see, this is really about taking the idea of listening and saying, actually, there's so many components to listening and really trying to dial them all up. So like the acknowledging, dialing that up is an example. So thank you. So that's one example of a skill which we consider to be a skill of listening. And in our book, we have a model of acknowledging different levels. So that idea of, um, you know, feeling with them, that's kind of a top level of acknowledging, but it might not be appropriate at all times. So it's actually dialing up and it's calibrating even what level of acknowledgement. And are there things that we intentionally do not acknowledge? So if my client says to me, I really hate it here, everybody here is nasty, nobody values anybody, just disrespectful, and what I really want is this thing. I actually don't acknowledge all of the things that are not wanted. It's an intentional non-acknowledging, and it's because I'm trying to listen for what's wanted. So this is the main idea. You can see some of the core skills there. Today I'll be talking about quieting and interjecting. My favorite one and the one that's most difficult for me. I just wanted to share those with you. And here I am with my co-author. This was literally 5 days ago. That's Robert and I. We're in the desert near Phoenix, Arizona. We were there for a conference. And that model that I just shared with you, Robert and I came up with that model in a writing retreat when we were in Canada. And so this model is something that's really, truly co-developed, co-designed with Robert. And I've learned so much from him. And if you can attend the other session, I think you'll see that Robert and I are very different. And I'm going to share with you two skills today. I hope Robert doesn't mind me saying this, but my natural approach is more towards the use of silence, right? So when I talk about silence, I'm using a skill that's really deeply part of who I am. And Robert is more the person who brought the interjecting. And in fact, he argued that the word should be interrupting. And I said, no, 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 no. There's a red line there. I'm never going to be advocating that coaches interrupt. And that's how we came upon the word interject. And I'll be describing those. So another of the big ideas of radical listening is that there are different motives for listening as human beings. And you can see we've divided them. Now, one of the reasons these are still hand drawn is to be upfront and honest to say there's probably more things. Some of these words might not be the right words, but we do think they capture the essence of what we're trying to suggest. So there's motives for listening that are about ourselves. And for example, I'm hoping that many of you have come with the motive of learning today. Some of you have come with the motive of connecting, but many you have the motive of learning. And therefore, one of the things we talk about is that intention leads to attention, which means that if my intention is to learn, I pay attention to certain things, implementable ideas, what I already know about this topic, how I might use something. So the intention of learning means we pay attention to certain things. And the beautiful thing there is that it applies in that pro-social category as well. So if we go in with the intention of appreciating, for example, which is one of my intentions when I go into every coaching conversation, I want to appreciate the person. And now you can see where the skill of acknowledging comes in. A part of my appreciating is acknowledging people. And that's why I dial up the acknowledging. But because my intention is to appreciate, I'm listening out for what do I admire about this person? What strengths are emerging here that I can hear? What needs to be acknowledged? So in that example of somebody coming and saying, everybody in my workplace, I can't trust anybody, it's my acknowledging is, wow, it, mu it must take a lot of um, um, courage on your part to go into that workplace every day, considering how challenging it is. I admire your resilience, and that's a genuine thing because I'm listening for what do I appreciate. So I just wanted to highlight this idea that there's different motives, including antisocial motives, and probably none of us will admit to this, but I would venture to say sometimes we listen in a way where we're listening so that we can undermine what the other person is saying, right? Sometimes we're listening to a particular view, maybe it's a political view, and I'm not really trying to listen to understand. I'm not listening to appreciate. I'm listening because I want to hear things where I can say, no, well, that's where you're wrong. And that would be what we would call antisocial listening. So this idea of going in with motives. And because I wanted today to be super practical as well, something that's going to be useful to you in your everyday conversations, whether they're professional or they're personal, is we do spend some time looking at what are some of the obstacles to listening that we encountered often in our work. And you'll see I've got a cactus there as an example of a barrier or something prickly that can get in the way sometimes. And I'm just going to highlight them for you. And if in the chat you can put, if you're comfortable to do it, knowing that this is being recorded, which is one of those that you think, oh, I need to be careful of that. Because the reason I'm sharing this is so we can be aware, are there things that pop into our head that can get in the way of us giving our full and undivided attention to someone else? So the comparing and competing are interesting ones, aren't they? As we're listening to somebody, we think, oh, you know what? I did that, or that happened to me. You could argue that this is a great way of demonstrating empathy, thinking, oh, I've been to Japan. Somebody says, I'm going to Japan. Oh, I've been to Japan. But are there times when that comparing is getting in the way of my connecting with the other person? And I'll give you a real example of competing. It happened to me, and this is a true story. I said to a colleague of mine, you know what? I've just come back from something and I've got unread, 200 unread emails in my inbox. I said this to a colleague, and I'm disappointed to see that this seems familiar to all of you as well. um, but I said I've got 200, and my colleague says, without skipping a beat, you got 200, I've got 400 unread emails in my inbox. And that's an example of competing. Now the problem is, I don't feel seen, valued, or heard. I've just said I've got 200. I'm kind of struggling with that. I'm thinking, how am I going to catch up with this? And the person who's listening to me says, oh, you got 200. I've got 400. So because I've written this book, I couldn't help myself. I said to my colleague, I said, look, do you mind if we just pause a moment? I just want to find something out. I'm curious. I said, how come you said that? What made you? And the intention was a positive one. The person said, I wanted you to realize it's not, people have it worse than you. 200's not that bad. But it didn't land that way for me. It landed in a way of saying, oh, 200 is nothing, where I was saying, I'm struggling with this. Mind reading, have you ever gone into a conversation thinking, I know what the other person's going to say? Now, if you have, I'm pretty sure that's getting in the way of your listening, because let's follow logic here. Let's be logical. Imagine I am going to talk to somebody and I know exactly what they're going to say before I even start listening. There's no need to listen because I'm like, I know. And the irony of this one is it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I know what they're going to say, so I'm going to be defensive. And because I'm defensive, they're going to say what I thought they were going to say. So it can turn into a negative. So all I'm saying with these is notice. If you ever go into a conversation thinking, I know what they're going to say, just notice it and dial that one right down to say, well, I have an idea what they might say, but I don't really know until I listen to them. Unsolicited advice, one of my least favorites. People saying, if I were in your shoes, Christian, and I haven't asked for them. I haven't asked for advice. And people are like, well, you know what I would do in your situation. So that famous saying, if you walk 100 steps in somebody's shoes, I have a different version of that, which is if you walk 100 steps in someone's shoes, you're 100 steps away from them and you've got their shoes, basically. You don't really know what it's like. Now, this is a difficult one to acknowledge, priority status. It's a tough one, and I've done this, so I want to own up to this. We'll be sitting in a group, we're talking about something, and I think, I know so much more about this topic. My voice is more important. I should be saying so. This particular topic, I know a lot about it, and I should be the one. And that means this idea of I know better can definitely get in the way of hearing what other people have to say. And then probably a very common one for all of us, time poverty. It's a perception of time poverty, which is, I wish I had more time, but I don't have time. But just think how that lands for the other person, because for the other person, what they're picking up is, I don't have time for you, because you do have time. We do have time. We're just saying I'm not prioritizing you. I've got so many other things to do. And so every time we say to somebody, walk with me while I'm on my way to another meeting, walk with me, or I'm just finishing this email, talk to me we're saying we don't have time for you. And so just some things to note here. And as I said, if any of those are your favorites, it would be interesting to see in the chat which are our favorites. Let me just have a glance there. Mind reading. Yeah, unsolicited advice. It's And again, if we want to do a little bit of self-reflection, there's a lot of comparing, a lot of mind reading. Thank you so much. Another kind of reflective practice question is, what are the situations in which these things happen? Maybe there's some situations where mind reading happens more than others. And are there certain relationships as well? And what a beautiful moment to reset some relationships. One of the things that would make me happiest as a result of this short conversation we're having is if some of you get back to me. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and just say, as a result of that, I pressed the reset button on a relationship. And that could be a professional one. Just to say, you know what? I don't think I've been genuinely listening to you, and I'm going to try to be better. I'm going to listen to you better. Um, a tough conversation could be, I'm sorry, I've taken you for granted for a little while. Sometimes you've been talking and I haven't been listening, and I'm going to change that. Thank you for being honest and sharing those. The first step of changing anything is recognizing it, becoming aware of it. So that's why I wanted to share some of these common barriers. And just to reassure everyone, they are very common. So another big idea for me is about self-compassion, being compassionate to others and being compassionate to ourselves, even while we're listening. And so one of our skills is accepting. And that's such a difficult skill, the skill of accepting. And in the context of radical listening, it's really about accepting the right of other people to feel a particular way or hold a particular opinion, even if it's almost opposite to your own. And one of the little things that I think, in order to boost my ability to accept, is this little phrase, which is, everybody is always in the middle of something. Everybody is always, that's all of us, that's all of you, that's me. We're always in the middle of something. And I don't know what that is when I'm listening to somebody. I don't know what they've been through today, the last week in life. And that really allows me to be more accepting, because sometimes I might think, well, that's very rude of them to say that to me, or they're seeming very cold and distant at the moment. But then I'm thinking, well, I don't know what else is going. So to practice this in real life, if anybody cuts you off in traffic, try that. That moment before the road rage of what are they? I really don't know what's going on for them. I genuinely use that. I'm like, this person might be on their way to the hospital. They've just heard some terrible news. They might be late for an important interview, and this is their only chance. And that really allows me to breathe and say, on some days, I'm that person. So, two skills I just wanted to share with you. And I'm doing it in a way that's compassionate to me. I'm starting with the one that I'm most comfortable with. And then I'm going to go on to the one which really pushes me outside my comfort zone. But I'm prepared to go outside my comfort zone so that people feel seen, valued, and heard, because that's just so important for me. But this is the easy one, and probably the challenging one for Robert. You can challenge him if you're listening to him. Silence. Um, with silence, there's actually three practical reasons. Again, I just want to highlight how this book came about. We were thinking listening is just so central to the practice of coaching. And I've written books about coaching, and I've given one chapter to listening. I'm like, listening deserves its own book. That's where this came up, because there's just so much we can go into. And this is just one part. But even with the use of silence, we're saying there's different purposes for using it. The length of silences are important. And so one way that I remember it is this idea of power of the pause. I was giving a presentation about coaching somewhere, and I was talking about the different skills of coaching. And there was this wonderful graphic artist. Have you been to those conferences where there's an artist who's drawing? And I was continually distracted by it. I was like, next time, this person needs to be out of my line of sight because I was like, what are they drawing? What is that, right? So I talked about bears as I was presenting this idea of listening. It's a psychology experiment by someone called Daniel Wegner. And Daniel Wegner had done a research experiment where he asked people not to think about a bear. And it turned out it's almost impossible. He would give an instruction to a group of people to say, do not think about a bear. The reason he was doing the research was he wanted to figure out all of the strategies human beings have to not think about something, right? And we have lots of strategies for that. Keep ourselves busy with something else, fixate on another topic, try to ignore it. But I talked about bears. And so when I talked about the power of the pause, this graphic artist drew two bear paws. And that stuck with me forever. And I remind myself of that when I'm listening, that pausing has power. Like just now, pausing for emphasis. But what about the clients just said something? They've said, maybe I can do that. And then pause from the coach's point of view. It's a kind of a pause to allow it to land. They've just said something. It's almost creating sacred space there. You've just said something so powerful that I don't want to say anything right now. But of course, in leadership, but also in coaching, not saying anything is a way of getting another person to take responsibility. It's so powerful. Silence can be so powerful. And, when I'm working in the health context with health professionals, one of the things many health professionals want is for their patients, and that's a problematic term, by the way. But let's use clients. What health professionals want is for their clients to take responsibility for getting better or for their health or for their well-being. And sometimes silence is a powerful way of doing that. So 3 ways. One is pausing, because as a coach, I want to formulate a better question, or pausing to allow me to make a better decision. But also we can use it to create space for thinking. And this is why unsolicited advice is so unhelpful. Sometimes we're jumping in with, hey, you know what I think you should do? We might be talking over the client, trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure it out, and I've jumped in and said, well, I would do this. And then also it's a way of creating tension to draw the client in. So I might say, could I ask you a challenging question to my client? Could I ask you a challenging question? Pause. The client says yes. And then I pause again. And that really amplifies the question. I could ask any question. I could ask any question after that. And the client would engage with it in a more, they were like, oh, Christian said this is a challenging question. And there's been it's kind of built up. So the question could simply be, what else could you do? But I've built it up as this is a meaningful question through the use of silence. So I would say, again, practical thing you can do straight away, and your coaches, you're doing this already, but I would say dial up as part of your experimenting, dial up silences. If you're comfortable with a 3-second silence, see how you're feeling with 5 seconds. If you're comfortable with 5, such a powerful intervention. And now on to the next skill, which I'm less comfortable with. Olivia, I should have asked Robert to do this one in his neck. He's much more comfortable with it. And by the way, honestly, I couldn't have written a book on radical listening. And whatever you read in that book, or all of these ideas, are genuinely much richer because we've come from slightly different perspectives, but we fully agree on what has emerged. So interjection, and there's been quite a lot of questions at the beginning about what's radical about radical listening. How is this better than active listening? Now, I would say, although we call it active listening, it's still quite passive, right? Active listening, for me, is a very high form of listening. But what we're mostly trying to do is look like we're listening. We're trying to convey that we're listening. And the way we do that is we're silent, we tilt our head, we ask clarifying questions. But it's quite passive because we're putting them in the speaker role. They're the speaker, I'm the listener, so therefore I don't say anything. But one of the radical things about radical listening is that we think asking questions and interjecting is part of radical listening. And the interjecting is there because we want to show we're right there with you. We're connected to you. We're right here. And my typical form of listening before we wrote this book, because for me, the person who brought me up, my mother was Japanese. And one thing she taught me very clearly is to be respectful and you must never interrupt. That was kind of a rule for me. Never interrupt anybody. So let's say I'm coaching someone and they say something notable like, and during this period, I won an award. I want to, part of me wants to jump in to say, oh, wow, you won an award, but I wouldn't do that. I'd say nothing. So I won an award, or last year was the most difficult time in my life, they might say. But I wouldn't say anything because I'm being respectful and I'm listening. My job is, so I would wait until the end of whatever it is. It could be 2 minutes later. And then 2 minutes later, I would acknowledge. I would say, oh, I'm really sorry. It sounds like it was a tough period in your life. Or, wow, did you win that award? That's great. But do you see that I've missed the moment? The moment's gone. And there could be doubt in the mind of the person I'm listening to about whether I was really listening to them. They could doubt it because at that moment I didn't say anything. So interject is about jumping in and jumping out. And I'll say something more about interjecting, but I want to share before that another of the big ideas. Another of the big ideas of radical listening is that we listen to people in a way that they feel listened to beyond any reasonable doubt. So if you can listen to someone where they have no doubt that you're listening to them, we think this is how we create the ideal environments for connection, for exploration, for vulnerability, is they have no doubt that we're listening to them. So I love this idea of beyond reasonable doubt. And if I want to do that, I should jump in at that moment because they might say, well, Christian, haven't you just heard? I just told you that was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever taken. So interject could be a word, it could be wow, it could be a facial expression, like we've already said. And here are the different purposes of interjecting. But the way I've come to terms with it is this idea of jump in, jump out. Because if I jump in and I stay there, that's an interruption. I've interrupted their flow of thought. But an interjection is I jump in and I jump out and I don't negatively affect the flow of what was happening. So I might jump in for emphasis. Oh my goodness, wow. That's it. I want to emphasize, I heard what you just said, and that's clarification. Hold on, this was last year? This was last year? That's it. jump in. I need to know this. You're talking about last year, or it's that team over there, but I'm out again. I don't go in and just clarify. Rallying. And I was just in the US, so I hope this is appropriate. But you know that phrase, you go girl, you go girl. That's perfect. Or they say preach. They'll be like, jump in, one word, preach. That thing. Rallying them. You can do this. You've got this. Right? Uh, jump in, jump out. Then going deeper. Oh my goodness. Wow. How did that come about? I'm listening to them, but I want to know more. So interjection. So we think it's pretty radical to say that part of listening is kind of interjecting. So that's the skill of interjecting. I'd like to give you, is it okay for us to just practice a couple of these skills? Is that all right for people? Yeah. I'm going to give you a choice. I've talked about two skills. One is the interjecting. That's kind of jumping in and jumping out for emphasis, clarification, rallying, or going deeper. And the other was silence, if you remember. Just pausing to frame my own question as a coach, but also using silence intentionally to allow things to land or to create space. So I'd just like you to get into pairs. Is pairs appropriate? I hope it is. Um, and just listen to the other person for um, just 4 minutes, just a chance to talk to somebody else. And if one of you gets into the role of the speaker and one of you gets into the role of the speaker, just so you can experiment with some of these ideas, I think that would be lovely. So I'm going to assign you automatically into groups. There's going to be 2 per room. And I'm going to make sure that this is 4 minutes and you'll only have 15 seconds to come back. Yeah, sorry, if somebody's dialing in, yeah, what are we chatting about is a good question. Please talk about what's coming up for you over the next week. That it can, I really want to emphasize radical listening can happen in any moment. So remember, the most important thing, you can practice a couple skills, but the most important thing is, if it's okay, that your intention is to make the other person feel seen, valued, and heard. So that's the main thing you're doing. You're just listening in that way. And if you want to experiment with interjecting or silences, we can do that as well. So I'm not sure how this is going to work. As I talk, I wonder, should it be 3 per group? No, I'm going to go with 2 per group and just see what happens. And it's 4 minutes and you'll be back. There's a 15-second timer. So I'm going to open the rooms now. Olivia, do you want to pause the recording? Okay, I'm looking for smiles. I'm looking for good. There are smiles. That's wonderful. Could I remind you to mute, please, just for audio? But I'm glad you had an experience. And the purpose of this, one of them was to show radical listening can happen in tiny increments. But the other, hopefully, is that each of us, there's opportunity to enhance certain bits, to tweak certain parts of what we do, maybe use some of our skills in slightly different ways. And for me, it's about, remember, I was talking about professional practice. For coaches and leaders, our ability to listen to people in a way that makes them feel valued or that empowers them or motivates them, it's so critical that for me, the skill of trying to enhance our listening, it's about that question, How can we be of even better service to others? And can we be through kind of really sharpening our listening skills? So I just want to uh, wrap up in terms of our formal time together, but there will be 15 minutes set aside for questions. Well, at least 15 minutes. If I'm honest with both of you, Paul and Olivia, I can be here for as long as needed, but since we've promised 15 minutes, we'll stick to that. So I'll just wrap up. If there's any big insights that you got simply from being listened to or listening, you'd like to type them in the chat. That might be helpful for when we get to questions. But I just want to share some of those, the kind of the big ideas that I've been trying to explore with you. Number one is we think it's very important. And that's why we think the starting point of radical listening is setting an intention. So the next time I meet my son, for example, I'm picking my son because he's the most important person in my life. Just setting an intention. I'm going to go meet and have a coffee with him, for example. In fact, I'm going to go watch a football game with him. That's the next time I'm going to see him. We watch Coventry. We support Coventry. Anyway, intention leads to attention. So if I think, the next time I'm going to listen to my son, my intention is this thing, then it focuses my attention on that. The second thing that we discovered, Robert and I, in writing this book was that we had made a mistake. We thought the worst thing you can do to someone is not listen to them. But having done this work on radical listening, we've realized the best thing is to provide full attention and do our best listening. The second best thing is not to listen to people. And the worst thing to do is half listen. And you know, this is such an important thing. And half listening means we're giving kind of sometimes active listening can take us down that route because we've picked up lots of strategies to look like we're listening. Or have you ever been in a situation where, well, let me talk about my son again, bearing in mind, I've promised him I won't do this, but he came back from school. This was 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. He came back from school. I'm in the middle of emails, my phone's ringing because something's happened at work, and he comes in the door. He's just been playing rugby. And I say, hey, did you have a good day at school? I've got a million things going on. I just want to say, did you have a good day? Get back to my stuff because I got emails, I got phone messages. And he's like, oh, well, during rugby, this kid tackled me and I was winded and I had to see the nurse. I was like, oh, good, great. I'm glad you had a great day. Went back to my work. Now, that's an example of half listening. I made it look like I wanted to hear what he had to say and I had no intention of listening. And that's worse because I'm giving mixed signals. I want to listen to you. I'm going to listen to you, but then I don't. And there's so many ways we do that. If we're listening to someone and then we get distracted and I'm looking at something else, or I'm thinking, oh, I wish this person would wrap it up because I've got something else to get to, that's half listening. So that's a big realization for us. Remember point 3, it's an important one for me. I think it makes me a better listener, is to know that everyone is in the middle of something all the time. All of us are in the middle of something. For this idea of jumping in and jumping out, we hope that's helpful. And then the last thing is this way of thinking about radical listening means that every interaction is an opportunity either to build connection or to avoid connection. And that can include going to the barista to get my coffee. And it's about appropriateness. Sometimes it's not appropriate. But if it's just me in the queue and there's a barista there's so many things I can do to avoid connection. And maybe there's something I can do at the same time to build connection. So that's mostly what I wanted to say. Please remember my intention at the start was to add value in some way. I hope something we've talked about has been useful to you. If you'd like to
Thanks.
know more about me, coachonamotorcycle.com. Thanks, Olivia.
Thanks so much, Christian, and thank you everyone for your engagement. So much to take away. The fact that radical listening is so central to the practice of coaching, that importance of helping people to feel seen and heard and valued, and intention really being central to that. I really loved thinking about then how we calibrate ourselves accordingly, and how many of us might have come into tonight's session saying, well, we're quite seasoned listeners. What more could there possibly be to this? And yet you're able to introduce us so skillfully to those micro skills like accepting silence, and the tricky or arguably tricky interjection, and that invitation, of course, for us all to potentially dial up some of those aspects a little bit more in our own practices. So thank you, Christian. If anybody needs to pop out, I just wanted to pop in the chat whilst everyone's with us. You mentioned, Christian, that Robert's event is going to follow suit next month. You're co-author of the book Radical Listening. And he's going to be deep diving on one of the micro skills of noticing. So there's a link in the chat where you can register, and you'll be able to watch the recording as well. But I also wanted to open up the floor, if I could, to some questions. And I wondered whether I could kick off with a question, please, Christian. And mine was that the skills are possibly some are harder than others. And one that seemed, potentially harder to me, and potentially to other coaches as well, was this accepting, given that it requires us to be humble, open, comfortable in ambiguity, uncertainty, and potentially for our clients as well, this might be challenging. Suspending our own judgments and our biases. I wondered, is that what you would consider one of the tougher skills to manage? And are there any special tips or techniques you might suggest?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. And another place to find out more about radical listening, Robert and I have done, I think together we've done maybe 30 podcasts. And if you go to Spotify, there's actually a radical listening playlist where you can listen to podcasts. There's like 20 hours of stuff there. It's really interesting, Olivia. Most of these podcasts, this book was published in the United States, and most of the podcasts are based in the US. And with what's going on over there, this was the one that attracted the most attention. How do you accept? And I'm so glad you asked me this, because for me, this is about being respectful. Respect is really underpins radical listening, is we're listening to people in a way that's respectful to them. And so, and I would say respect is like oxygen. If it's not there, that's all you notice. I'm not going to open up somebody who's disrespecting me. If I feel disrespected, I'm going to shut down. So it's about respect. And the accepting that I'm talking about, if you pare it down to its fundamental, it's respecting the right of the other person to hold an opinion or a view which might be different to my own. That's it. And I want to highlight accepting a view. It's accepting their right to hold that view. It's not accepting the view. You don't have to agree with them. But, and I genuinely believe this now, Olivia, and it's through my coaching practice that I've come to believe this, is that I know how I got to my belief and how I've come to my opinions. And some of them I hold very dearly. But I want to give that same right to anybody else. They've come to their belief through a particular way. And so accepting doesn't mean I could accept their right to have the view and then say, I don't have that view and I don't agree with the view. But it comes down to accepting their right to have that view. And you can imagine that this is a showstopper. If I think you don't have the right to have that view, I'm not listening to you. I'm like, I don't agree with it. You don't have the right to have your view. Although I have the right to have my view. There's no basis. So my naive hope is that radical listening is a way of just building that initial connection, that allows relationships to build off of it. It's not a shortcut to a powerful relationship, but it's a shortcut to something that's necessary for relationships to form. And I'm not going to build a relationship with someone who doesn't respect my right to hold an opinion. I would say, well, I can never have a relationship with that person. Vicky.
Thanks, Christian. That's great. Vicky's got a hand up.
Thanks, Christian, and thanks, Paul. My question is really around interjecting but going deeper, because it's pretty scary to do that as a coach. So I suppose my question to you was, what is your advice about, hints or tips about how to go deeper with the client without being disrespectful, I suppose, or doing it too quickly? That's one way of also saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think respecting boundaries is part of this as well, isn't it? So thank you for that. And again, it's a jump in, jump out. I see it as an invitation. Would you like to tell me more about that kind of thing? They've just said something, and you're like, wait a minute, there's more there. Or I might say, and to use another Americanism, maybe, do you know that? Wait, what? Do you know that little phrase? Wait, what? What was that? Is there something there? It allows the person to say, oh, that's not really important right now, or just ignore it. But what? That is an invitation. I'm going to say more about that. Like they're chatting and they'll say, oh, and then he threw his mug at me, and they just carry on. You're like, what? Threw his mug? Question mark? Yeah, he does that, blah, blah. Or, yeah, that's not acceptable. So it's an invitation to go deeper. And I wouldn't say, let's go deeper, but it's like, wait, is there something here? That kind of is what I would think might be helpful in some situations. I can see Karen's gone analog with her hand. So can we go to Karen?
Sorry. So I just wondered, like, of the ways of connecting with people, like, would you say most frequently derails a session?
Ways of connecting with people that can derail a session.
Yeah, so like, if we look at like noticing or quieting or accepting, or acknowledging, etc., which of them has got the most risk of derailing?
Well, I think it's an obvious one. I'm probably going to say interjecting. I'm still learning it. But I have a bias against it. So I think it's really, Olivia used this word. The biggest risk is this is a nonsense word, but non-calibration is the biggest risk with anything. So a silence at the wrong time, an interjection at the wrong time, a question at the wrong time. And in fact, Robert gives this great example. So he was saying to somebody, you know what, I've always wanted to go to Paris. It was been my dream since I was however old. Paris is such a great city. And, I went there last month. And the person he was talking to said something like, oh, what airline did you fly with? And Robert's like, what? Do you see that the question, it's just a question and could be a curious question, but it's not aligned. It's kind of out of sync. So I think the biggest risk with any conversation is that we're not in sync with the other person. And this is the risk with novice coaches, so people just learning how to coach. If you've got a list of questions, this is the problem, right? And that's how often coaching is taught, is you ask these questions, then you ask those. So that's why asking questions is a radical listening skill, because it's not about the type of questions you ask, it's ensuring that the question follows exactly what the person has said. And the social etiquette of there should be no silences in conversations, I think Karen also gets in the way of connection, because maybe my client's still speaking and I've already started formulating my next question because, oh my goodness, there should be no silences. That kind of disconnection of, is this person really listening to me? So Karen, your question is great because it comes back to that. if possible, we should give our client no reason to doubt that we're listening to them.
So just following on from what you were saying, I felt that, you know, obviously we have to pay attention to all of them, but the one that scared me was the deep questioning, because I feel like you can really go down the wrong path, like with that plain example, like the, you know, which airline you can, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love it that you care about that, and that's the really important thing. Is we want to show the person we're with them the whole time. That's why the interjecting is important. We're with you. We're walking right alongside you all the time. That's what we're trying to convey. And anything, but remember the self-compassion piece, Karen, as well, right? So we can get things wrong, and I get things wrong all the time. And if I do, I would apologize. Maybe I shouldn't have asked that question. Sorry, or sorry, I did get distracted. I would say things like that. That's another way of, if we do get something wrong, just to immediately acknowledge it. Because radical listening is also about creating a psychologically safe space for our client to be vulnerable. And for us to be vulnerable, Karen, is another way of just saying, oh, sorry, I got that wrong. Apologies, and then get things back on track. But it's great that you're concerned about that. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Christian, I'd love to invite Rosalind to expand on her, if you're comfortable, Rosalind, your question and your comments in the chat.
I don't know that I had a question, Olivia. I was just thinking out loud, but didn't want to interrupt because I was just visualizing a ladder with, at the bottom, the lowest rung is kind of cosmetic listening, where, you know, we might be chatting about what we're going to do tonight and where we might go, etc. And there's nothing really substantive in there. And the connection is very tenuous, light. The cosmetic listening. And then there's conversational listening, which is maybe a little bit deeper and born of maybe respect or affection for each other or whatever. Active listening, which we talked about, where there's a lot of affirming signals, and we're trying to indicate that we're really heeding what the person's saying. Deep listening, which is more the kind of listening that Christian's talking about. And now radical listening. And I always thought that deep listening was really listening to try and understand and shutting off the listening to respond mechanism. But I think radical listening brings up some really different, deeper things. And I love the way that you've said it's about creating a safe space where you can be vulnerable together.
Yeah.
And
that's beautiful. I love the ladder.
Do you? Oh, good. I'm a visual. But yes, but thank you. It's been amazing, Christian. Really, really useful.
Rosalind, the ladder is perfect because it's also about appropriateness, right? So if it's a social event where you're just having maybe cosmetic is fine, maybe that's what it is. But when it comes to coaching conversations or meaningful leadership conversations, sometimes it needs to be up there at the top of the ladder. So I love that example or analogy.
Thank you.
Is this where we're practicing silence? I'm just checking.
Yes.
What I was doing before, seeing what emerges.
See what emerges. Yeah. No, thank you so much, everyone, for your engagement and thoughtfulness. It's I really appreciate that. It's been wonderful spending time with you. And if you're watching the recording, thanks for taking the time to watch the recording. It's meaningful to me that people care about this because it's such an important thing. Catherine?
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge what Rosalind shared about the ladder, and it just took me on I went on an extra rung, if you like, or went sideways onto a sideways platform. I can hear the beauty in radical listening is beyond listening to understand. And I put a quick note in the chat because I know when I listen to understand, it's about me trying to understand that person over there. So it's still about me. What I can hear, Christian, what you and Robert are creating is listening. What if it's no longer about you and I, but it's almost like we're a completely new space together. So there's not this need to understand. It's being with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that just opens up such a different dynamic of interacting with another.
Yeah. You see, that brings me full circle. That, the subtitle is The Art of True Connection. It's really about how do we connect with another human being. And you're right, the listen to understand. The other reason I like it as rungs on a ladder is none of them are bad points to be. And an example is you can test whether you've built that kind of connection with somebody when just by asking the question, how are you going? I was trying to do that in Australian, but how are you? Right? How are you? Can you see it really depends. If you're at cosmetic level with people, they know that you don't care. We often say, how are you? I don't really want to know. Imagine, how are you? And they're like, well, if you really want to know. But if you can ask that question in a way that conveys, I really care about this. If you say, how are you? And the person actually says, well, actually, that's an indication of you've managed, you're up there on the higher. And I like the ladder because Robert and I aren't saying you need to be listening radically all the time. Radical listening is when the intention is building a connection with somebody, where that relationship is so important to you. We couldn't be listening radically all the time. So the ladder is great. But I would say if we're professional coaches, it's our responsibility to continue to hone our skills so that we can be of better service to others. That's what being a professional is all about. So, yeah, it's really this idea of dialing up or calibrating or honing. Thank you. Insights, yeah. Pausing as you ask that question, amplify the word. Yeah, yeah. How are you? Yeah, there's strategies we can use. You could say something like, no, really, how are you? But I've practiced this thing in my coaching sessions. And I noticed that in the first session, they're like, yeah, I'm fine. It's okay. But by session 4, we sit down and I'm intentional about these things. One of the things I'm intentional about, slowing down right at the beginning of a coaching conversation, including the pace. So I slow things down. They come in, hey, how are you, Christian? How's it going? I'm good. Pause. How are you? And tell me a bit more. Slowing things down at the beginning is intentional. But by session 4, they're actually telling me how they are. Whereas session 1, they're so used to those cosmetic conversations, they think Christian's just saying, how you going? Rather than being interested in me. So another way of looking at radical listening, you're right about where I'm quite visual, you might have noticed, but where is the spotlight, right? So when you're radically listening to somebody, it should feel to them like the spotlight's on them. And that's why interjecting, you kind of jump in. It's almost like the spotlight comes to you for a second, but then goes back to the main character. It should feel like me time for the person you're listening to. And that's what coaching is, right? Coaching is me time. And our role is to create an environment for people to do their best listening. And I think if they're listened to in a way that is respectful and that they're the center of attention and that they feel valued, they're going to do their best thinking. Thank you, Rosalind. Thanks so much. It's just been great to spend time with all of you. Really appreciate it. Oh, how did you do those hearts? There they go. Thanks. Thanks, Ty.
Thank you so much, Christian. On behalf of our Association for Coaching community, we want to say a huge thanks for you volunteering your time and your expertise and your energy to share with us all that relates to radical listening. As you say, listening is the intervention. I'm going to pop in the chat again the opportunity to follow up from this conversation with Robert next month. So make sure you register and come along so we can continue this conversation. If everyone would like to pop in the chat, I can see there have already been some lovely messages thank Christian perhaps in your own way. Thank you very much.
And thank you both, Paul and Olivia. Thanks everyone for being here. And Robert is the smart one. I would go to Robert's session. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Christian.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, Christian. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much. It was great. Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you.
Bye.